Before we begin today's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you love hearing real-life stories of aviation mysteries, accidents, and the lessons behind them. Your support keeps us motivated to bring you more detailed stories like this. Today, we will talk about a plane crash that shook the world, a story of human error, mechanical mistakes, and survival against all odds. This is the incident of Tuninter Flight 1153, which happened on 6th August 2005. On that day, a small turboprop aircraft carrying 49 people faced a chain of mistakes that led to one of the most shocking aviation tragedies in Mediterranean history. 16 people tragically lost their lives while others survived in an almost impossible situation. But what exactly happened that day? How could so many small oversights come together to cause such a disaster? And most importantly, what can we learn from it today? Let's break this down in simple story-like language. Tuninter Flight 1153 was operated by Tuninter Airlines, a regional carrier based in Tunisia. On that day, the aircraft was scheduled to fly from Bari International Airport in Italy to Djerba Zarzis International Airport in Tunisia. The plane was an ATR 72-202, a small twin-engine turboprop aircraft commonly used for short regional flights. Compared to big jets like the Boeing 737 or Airbus A320, this aircraft was smaller but efficient for short hops across the Mediterranean. On board were 35 passengers, mostly Italian tourists, heading for a holiday in the Tunisian resorts. Along with them were 4 crew members, Captain Shafiq Al-Gharbi, co-pilot Ali K. Bayer, and 2 flight attendants. Plus, a ground technician was also hitching a ride. The captain, Shafiq Al-Gharbi, was 45 years old with more than 700 hours of flight experience, of which over 5,500 hours were on ATR 72s. This means he knew the plane like the back of his hand. The co-pilot, Ali Bayer, was younger, 28 years old, with over 2,400 hours of flying. Both men were competent, professional, and well-trained. By all accounts, this was supposed to be a routine, uneventful flight across the beautiful blue waters of the Mediterranean. But sometimes, it is exactly when everything seems normal that tragedy hides in plain sight. The chain of errors began the night before the flight. The fuel quantity indicator, or FQI, of the aircraft, basically the device that shows how much fuel is in the tanks, was found to be faulty. This part needed replacement. But here's where the first mistake happened. The maintenance crew accidentally installed the FQI for an ATR-42, a smaller aircraft, instead of the FQI for an ATR-72. Now you might wonder, how big a deal can that be? Both planes are ATRs. They look almost identical, right? Well, here's the catch. The ATR-42 has 4 fuel sensors, while the ATR-72 has 5 fuel sensors because its tanks are larger. So when the ATR-42's FQI was installed in an ATR-72, it gave false readings. It showed more fuel than actually present. To put it simply, the plane was running on an empty stomach, but the cockpit gauges were lying, showing that the tank was full. Earlier that day, the ATR-72 had flown from Tunis to Bari. Because it already had leftover fuel from a previous leg, the plane managed to complete the trip without issues. The false gauge told the crew they had over 3,000 kilo of fuel, when in reality they had only 790 kilo, barely enough for one leg. When the plane landed in Bari, it was refueled again. The incorrect gauge still gave misleading numbers, showing 2,700 kilos of fuel, while in reality, only 570 kilos of usable fuel remained. This was a ticking time bomb. The ATR-72 took off from Bari with everyone relaxed. Tourists chatted about beaches, the crew did their routine, and the pilots believed they had plenty of fuel. But 45 minutes into the flight, at 23,000 feet, the right engine suddenly stopped. The cockpit filled with alarms. The pilots, shocked, thought it must be a technical failure because the gauges showed plenty of fuel. They tried restarting the engine unsuccessfully. Barely 100 seconds later, the left engine also died. Now, both engines were out. The ATR-72 became a glider over the Mediterranean Sea. Imagine the horror in the cabin, passengers sensing the sudden silence of the engines, the sinking feeling of descent, and the nervous voices from the cockpit. The pilots declared an emergency and aimed for Palermo Airport in Sicily, the nearest place with a long enough runway. But without engines, the aircraft had limited glide range. The captain quickly realized they couldn't make it to Palermo. The plane was losing altitude too fast. In those tense minutes, Captain Shafiq made a life-or-death decision: ditch the plane into the sea near cargo ships, hoping rescue would come quickly. Ditching, landing a plane on water, is one of the most dangerous maneuvers a pilot can attempt. If done wrong, the aircraft can break apart instantly. Unfortunately, the ATR hit the water at high speed and wrong angle, breaking into 3 pieces. The crash was devastating. 16 people lost their lives, 14 passengers, 1 flight attendant, and 1 ground technician. But 23 others survived, including both pilots and many passengers. Survivors later described the terrifying moments, how the plane hit the water, how they struggled to swim, and how rescuers from nearby ships pulled them to safety. Some people clung to wreckage, others were injured but managed to stay afloat. The Mediterranean on that day became both a grave and a savior. The Italian aviation authorities launched a detailed investigation. What they found shocked the aviation. The first problem was the maintenance error. The wrong fuel gauge had been installed, a simple but fatal mistake. Then came pilot oversight. Even though Captain Shafiq noticed unusual fuel readings before, he did not raise concerns. During the emergency, investigators argued that better gliding technique might have allowed the plane to reach Palermo Airport instead of crashing into the sea. And finally, there were systemic weaknesses. The airline's procedures failed to catch the faulty installation, and communication gaps existed between pilots and maintenance teams. The report concluded that this was not one person's fault, but a chain of errors, from mechanics to pilots to weak safety culture. In 2009, an Italian court handed out severe sentences. Captain Shafiq Al-Gharbi was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Several other Tuninter officials and mechanics received 8 to 10 years each. This decision sparked massive debate. Some argued that the captain had done everything possible under impossible circumstances and punishing him was unfair. Others said he should have questioned the strange fuel readings earlier. For the families of victims, no sentence could bring back their loved ones. Tuninter Airlines was also banned from flying in Italy and later rebranded itself under a new name. The Tuninter Flight 1153 tragedy left the aviation world shaken, but also wiser. Key changes included improvements in the design of FQIs so that mismatched indicators could never be installed again, stricter maintenance checks and verification procedures, and enhanced pilot training in emergency gliding and ditching techniques. This incident became a case study for aviation schools worldwide, teaching how small human errors can snowball into deadly disasters. Beyond technicalities, the story of Flight 1153 is about real people, families who lost loved ones, survivors, who lived with trauma, and rescuers who risked their lives pulling people from the sea. Cockpit recordings later revealed the captain's last moments trying desperately to restart the engines, and then praying when nothing worked. It reminds us that even professionals, in their final moments, are human, scared, hopeful, and clinging to life. The Tuninter Flight 1153 crash is a chilling reminder. In aviation, there is no such thing as a small mistake. A wrongly fitted part, a misread gauge, a missed question, each can set off a chain reaction leading to tragedy. But it's also a story of survival, of quick thinking in impossible circumstances, and of the resilience of the human spirit. If you found this story informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more such stories from the skies. Stories that teach, inspire, and remind us why aviation safety matters. Tell us in the comments, what do you think? Was the captain fairly punished? Or was the real fault somewhere else? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep flying.